Thank you to my patrons. Your generosity and commitment to my work is astonishing. I sincerely appreciate it. And please notice the other thing, dear listener, the most ironic thing in the entire video, where he implies that atheists are arrogant, where he implies that atheists are the ones who are suggesting that they know more than what it is acceptable to claim that one knows.
Who the fuck am I to profess such a deep understanding of all the mysteries our universe has to offer?
All atheists are saying is that they're unconvinced in the claims that religious folk make.
If you ever try to bullshit me like that again, I will rip off your arms.
Hey everybody, Magic Skeptic here, and don't worry, the video is about to begin. I just wanted to take a moment to make you aware of my Patreon, the link for which can be found in the description below. Sign up today for as little as £3 per month and you can gain access to a plethora of perks and extras, including downloadable audio-only and ad-free versions of my podcast that you can listen to on the go. You can also have your question answered in a monthly video, and better still, depending on which tier you choose, you could even sit down for a Skype call with yours truly, Magic Skeptic. All that is available and much, much more. All you got to do is click the link in the description below. I hope to see you there. Hey everybody, Magic Skeptic here, and you're all most welcome to the second episode of The Most Annoying Non-Religious People. Yes, you heard that right. Guys, this isn't your typical atheist or skeptic YouTube channel. I don't just spend all of my time bashing religion, and in fact, I've made numerous videos at this point where I've talked about the things in religion that I like. So that wasn't even true before this series, but just in case it wasn't already abundantly clear, I don't only focus on the arguments of religious people, I also focus on the arguments of atheists, skeptics, and agnostics folks. We're not above making mistakes, and we're not above making fallacious arguments. I know I've made mistakes on the channel in the past that my viewers, and thank you to you guys, have pointed out in the comments, and I've had to own up to those mistakes and respond to those comments and say, you know what, you're right, that is a fallacy, or I've made a mistake there. And so I try to hold myself to a very high standard, and so needless to say, I also do that with others, especially the people who are on my side of this debate, my fellow atheists, agnostics, and skeptics. So without further ado, we're going to jump into another video here today, and I'm speaking, of course, about the channel known as Shadetree Surgeon. Shadetree Surgeon is a self-avowed atheist, and he made a video wherein he alleges that, quote-unquote, atheists are assholes. And shockingly enough, I have a few thoughts on the matter. So without further ado, we're going to dive right into Shadetree Surgeon's video. Have a listen, and we'll meet back here in a moment to discuss it.
So, as many of you know, I run and tend bar at a little pub for a living. And we've got a general rule of thumb for conversation. Pretty much anything goes, except for no politics and no religion.
In other words, your bar forbids your guests from discussing literally anything interesting. Sounds like a great time.
Now, leaving politics to the side, you'd probably say that religion is kind of a non-issue in a den of iniquity, such as our little pub, and for the most part, you'd be right. We don't exactly have missionaries beating down our door trying to convert all the little lost lambs on bar stools into devout Christians. But believe it or not, we've got a fair number of regulars who are religious to varying degrees.
Yeah, shockingly enough, in a world where the vast majority of people are religious, the majority of people in your bar are religious. Who knew?
And for the most part, besides maybe giving up their favorite beer for Lent or the odd Jesus piece here and there, you'd never know that they were religious at all. So believe me when I say the moratorium on religious discussion is definitely not because of them. It's because atheists are assholes.
Yeah, I'm so triggered. Don't you just love when people assume that what they're saying is triggering for others? This is a really weird phenomenon that I'm noticing in the online space where people will say in advance, oh, well, forgive me if this is triggering, or, you know, I know I'm going to trigger a whole load of folks when I say this, but, and they just kind of use this phraseology where they assume that what they're going to say is controversial. I'm not triggered at all by him saying that atheists are assholes. And, you know, I can already see some of the trolls jumping into the comments below and saying things like, oh, well, Magic Skeptic, you're obviously triggered if you're making a video about it. But no, I don't make this video because I'm triggered. I make this video because what Shadetree Surgeon is about to say is erroneous and ignorant at best. But look, we haven't gotten to the fallaciousness yet. You can be the judge. Let's continue.
I used to be an asshole atheist, and while I still identify as an atheist, I'd like to think that I'm not quite so much of an asshole anymore.
The irony of suggesting that you're not an asshole anymore whilst making a video wherein you allege that atheists are assholes is almost too much to bear. I mean, does he not see the hypocrisy here? Oh, well, I'm definitely not an asshole atheist anymore. I'm just the kind of asshole who calls atheists assholes. How many times did I say asshole in that sentence?
Long story short, I eventually became open to and aware of the concept of a higher power not existing. And one teenage punk rock montage later, I was identifying as an atheist. Now this I just threw myself into with all the fervor that I never possessed for faith. I absolutely just devoured books and documentaries and any scrap of media I could get my hands on that was devoted to atheism. Atheism was my new religion, and I made it my personal mission to convert as many people to it as I possibly could with all the class and grace that an angry teenager possesses.
There's a lot to respond to here already, and I'm going to try my best to break this down. The first thing I want to address is this, this phenomenon, which I will say in my anecdotal experience is quite common. The stereotype of the atheistic teenager.
With all the class and grace that an angry teenager possesses.
It is true to say that a lot of people lose their faith in their teenage years, but if you want to know my personal guess as to why that is, it's because the claims of religion are so easily recognizable as hogwash that even a teenager can recognize that it's nonsense. Hence the reason a lot of teenagers lose their faith. There might very well be other reasons. One could psychologize it and say that in our teenage years, we develop an independent spirit and we resist the teachings of our elders. And, there's good evolutionary reasons for us to do that, because if you as a teenager continued to rely entirely on the people above you, and if you continue to be a baby, basically, you wouldn't survive. You require an independent spirit which can produce a counterculture, and that counterculture can include a resistance to religious teachings that have been taught from on high from when you're young. There's all sorts of reasons, in other words, and I find them compelling to varying degrees, and there's a whole lot more that could be said in this topic. But suffice to say, I agree that this stereotype is in fact not just a stereotype. It might actually just be a statistical commonality that you can get angsty teenager atheist types. I mean, that's what happened to me, folks. I started to lose my faith when I was 18, and I was a fully self-avowed atheist by the time I was 19 or 20. And yeah, I didn't have any class or grace then either, because I was a teenager. But that isn't evidence that atheism makes a person an asshole. I mean, think of it this way, right? Teenagers are just one example. We could take another belief, the belief in Santa Claus. Children can be dicks as well. Children can be very unpleasant. And it just so happens that children highly correlate with the belief in Father Christmas or Santa Claus. Does that mean that believers in Santa Claus are assholes because of their belief in Santa Claus? Guys, the truth is, children believe all sorts of things, and children can be relatively rude depending on their upbringing, depending on how defiant they are, depending on how independent their spirit is, and so forth. And so the fact that atheism correlates with this isn't very compelling to me. It certainly doesn't constitute evidence for atheism being a causal factor in one's assholery. I've met atheists who are kind, I've met atheists who are unkind and rude, I've met theists who are kind, and I've met theists who are unkind and rude. And to be honest, I don't see a very broad correlation between one or the other. People are individuals, and they can have all sorts of beliefs and lack thereof, and they may or may not be assholes. And so, to be honest, I have a problem with this video from the word go. Can you imagine how insensitive it would be if I made a video wherein I said Christians are assholes or theists are assholes? How ridiculous would that be to paint everyone with the one brush? It sounds like Shadetree Surgeon was a particularly unpleasant atheist himself, and it sounds like he's bumped into a few unpleasant atheists, and as a consequence of those experiences, he's decided to extrapolate and conclude that all atheists or most atheists are assholes, and it's just completely inappropriate. And to be honest, it's quite embarrassing that I have to explain this in a video in 2022. So apologies, dear listener, if this is coming across as extremely obvious, but given the fact that this is baked into the heart of his video, I felt the need to clarify these rather simple moral notions. But with that clarified and that acknowledged, let's move on.
I was absolutely horrible. I would just interject myself totally uninvited into friends and strangers' conversations because any mention of church or faith in my presence would just spiral me into this uber pretentious diatribe that would really only end when the other party either capitulated or just walked away in disgust. And not only did I have a freshly acquired knowledge of atheism and all its common arguments, but I had a private school level education in divinity and the Bible. And they made for a pretty obnoxious combination in the hands of a self-absorbed teenager. I mean, I just frothed at the mouth, just waiting for someone to bring up religion in my presence so I could just start to tear it down. I was a bully.
Again, here, it's quite obvious. Can't you see what I'm saying, dear listener? He's talking about being a self-absorbed teenager.
And they made for a pretty obnoxious combination in the hands of a self-absorbed teenager.
To be honest, it wouldn't matter what philosophy or what new belief he encountered or adopted. He was going to be arrogant and rude in his presentation of that belief anyway. It just so happens that his belief in this particular time in his life, the thing that dominated most of his time and his interest was atheism. And so that happened to be the fulcrum of his arrogance. That just so happened to be the fulcrum of his rudeness and his unpleasantness. But all of this is a description of him as an individual and of him as a teenager. This has nothing to do with atheism. There's nothing in atheism that suggests that one should go out and be an asshole. And by the way, that's not the same when it comes to religious faith, right? Depending on which religion you speak to, there is an evangelical expectation where you're supposed to go out into the world and tell people that they're wrong and that they're going to burn in hell forever. In other words, you're meant to go out and threaten people into joining your faith, and that is considered to be central to the practice of certain evangelical faiths and denominations. But there's nothing like that in atheism. There is no atheist rule book. There is no creed, which is why I reject your earlier claim that atheism is your new religion.
Atheism was my new religion.
You might have been behaving in an evangelical fashion, but that doesn't come from atheism. There is no how-to book. There's no atheist guide that instructs its adherents to go out into the world and to be an asshole and to spread atheism and to tell people that they're wrong and to be arrogant and to be unpleasant. These are all things that you were doing, Shadetree Surgeon. And just because you can find other atheists doing them as well, that doesn't mean that atheism is a net negative or that atheism has caused people to do this. It just so happens that arrogant people will use their atheism to put down religious people. And there's no shortage of arrogant people. But the same is true in religion. How many arrogant religious folk are there out there? Right? How many religious people go around and condescend and pretend like atheists are morons and pretend like non-believers are idiots and that they're going to go to hell and all this kind of stuff, right? You're just talking about arrogance, and for some bizarre reason, you're intimately coupling arrogance and rudeness and unpleasantness with atheism simply because you were an asshole. And it seems to me like you still are, because you're making a video wherein you allege that atheists are assholes. How much of an asshole does that make you? I mean, this is baffling to me. The irony is obscene. But let's move on.
It wasn't until I was much older and just slightly wiser that I could really look back and realize what an obnoxious little sucker I had been. The problem is, a lot of atheists just never stop being that person I just described. They just remain being that same insufferable, holier-than-thou prick who cares more about being right than they care about being a decent human being.
You mean like the kind of atheist who thinks that they're holier than all other atheists? You mean like the kind of atheist who thinks that they're better than all other atheists? You mean the kind of atheist who thinks that other atheists are assholes, but that they have risen above that assholery because of some penetrating moral insight? You mean that kind of insufferable asshole atheist? The exact kind of atheist you're being in this video, you moron. Are you kidding me? And even if this irony weren't present, how ridiculous is this claim? He keeps throwing out phrases like most atheists never grow up, or most atheists never escape this teenage angsty phase, and so forth.
The problem is a lot of atheists just never stop being that person I just described.
But what is his basis for this claim? What are you basing this on? Where is your statistical data of the prevalency of assholery among the atheist community? I don't know about you, Shadetree Surgeon, but I've been in attendance at a lot of atheistic events. I've been a part of the atheist community for a long time now, and anytime I meet up with my fellow atheist brothers and sisters, 99 times out of 100, they're lovely, genuine, decent, kind people. They're not the kind of people you describe. Maybe you've been exposed to an anecdotally asshole bunch of atheists. You know, maybe the atheists in your immediate community are very unpleasant people, and maybe the reason that you're friends with them or know them is because birds of a fucking feather flock together, my friend, because your assholery is on full display in this video, my friend. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. But if you're going to say that most atheists are assholes, you're going to have to produce some statistical data on this. You're going to have to, first of all, define terms. What exactly constitutes an asshole? And where's the data to support that atheists even fit this definition of asshole that's operating beneath the surface of your allegations and your assertions here? This is just really, really silly. And all I can tell you is that my anecdotal experience differs from yours. Now, am I making the opposite claim, that atheists are not assholes and that the majority of atheists are kind? No. Please notice, dear listener, that all I've said is that I've been to a lot of events and that my anecdotal experience reveals that atheists are nice. But I'm not actually entering a comment, a statistical comment on what atheists are or are not. Truth is, I'm agnostic on that proposition because I don't have any data. It's Shadetree Surgeon here who is alleging that atheists, or that most atheists, are assholes, but he isn't offering any data to support this beyond mere assertion. And so, in the classic words of Christopher Hitchens, that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed as such. And that's precisely what I'm going to do here. I'm going to dismiss your assertions, Shadetree Surgeon. Let's move on.
They wear their supposed acceptance of life's eventual oblivion like some sort of nihilistic merit badge.
He believes in nothing.
He believes in nothing, Lebowski, nothing.
Just waving it around in everybody's faces as if it somehow makes them a better person. They just heap scorn and derision on anybody who dares deviate from their beliefs.
I mean, I don't even know what you're talking about. It just seems like this video is a hit piece. This video is a sensationalist propaganda hit piece designed to tear down the atheist community and make us look worse, right? As though the atheist community really needed that. I mean, there's data on this question about atheists being the least trusted group and so forth, and that data is very unsettling. And it's just a real shame, quite frankly, that you're out there making atheists look worse. Now, somebody could very well lay that at my feet and say, but Magic Skeptic, this series of videos that you're making right now is you attacking non-religious people. I would rephrase slightly. I would say, no, I'm not attacking non-religious people. I'm merely critiquing the arguments. I'm not attacking the character of atheists. I'm not encouraging people to distrust them or to view them as malicious or sinister or anything of that nature. I'm not attacking atheists as people. I'm attacking the arguments that some atheists, skeptics, or agnostics might make, just like the argument that's being presented by Shadetree Surgeon in this video. There's a very big difference between attacking people's ideas and attacking them as people. That distinction is central. It's pivotal to my channel. I don't attack people, and on the rare occasion that I did launch an ad hominem, it will have been in response to an extreme speaker. It will have been in response to a really unpleasant or extreme case. But 99 times out of 100 on this channel, what I'm doing is focusing on the arguments, not the people. In this video, I'm focused on Shadetree Surgeon's arguments. But notice that in his video, he's focused on atheists as people. He's not attacking the arguments. He's just saying that atheists as people are assholes. And that is despicable. And that's precisely why I'm making this video in response. This kind of rhetoric needs to be challenged, and it needs to be shown for the ridiculous rhetoric that it is. Has he provided a shred of evidence? No. he hasn't. But let's keep listening just in case he's got some.
You see, these folks have forgotten or maybe never truly known what it actually means to be a skeptic, and they definitely have more than a little trouble being a decent human. I mean, if you're going to be a skeptic, at least where religion is concerned, you should be just as skeptical of your own beliefs as you are of everybody else's. If pressed for an answer, I'll say no. I personally do not believe in a higher power, but I'm also open to the concept that I could be just totally wrong. Of course, I don't think I'm wrong, but who the f*** am I to state my stance on religion as an absolute truth?
Can you hear all of the allegations by implication here? He's implying that atheists have this false certitude.
Who the f*** am I to state my stance on religion as an absolute truth?
Or that atheists are trying to describe their point of view as factual and that everybody else's is just flat out wrong 100%.
You should be just as skeptical of your own beliefs as you are of everybody else's.
But again, I don't know what you're talking about here. Richard Dawkins is one of the world's foremost atheists, one of the most popular, and he is arguably the face of what has been termed militant atheism, a ridiculous phrase if, you know, you want my opinion on it. Militant seems to imply violent, but obviously, Richard Dawkins isn't violent and the atheist community isn't violent. So, you know, I don't know why they use that phrase, but, you know, extending an olive branch, perhaps all they mean is, you know, aggressive or hostile atheism. Richard Dawkins is definitely the poster child for hostile or aggressive atheism, and yet even he is not prepared to say that he's 100% certain. He lays this out in his book, The God Delusion. He lays out a 7-point scale where 7 would be completely certain that God doesn't exist, and even he isn't willing to say that he's a 7. He's like a 6.5 or a 6.9 or something. So he's very close to certain, but he's not certain. He's not willing to say 100% because that would be unscientific. That would be irrational because there's always a chance that you're wrong. And wherever I meet atheists, that's exactly what I hear. Show me the atheists who think that it's 100% true that there is no God.
Who the f*** am I to state my stance on religion as an absolute truth?
Again, I don't know what he's talking about here. These are just all straw men that have been set up so that he can knock them over and declare victory and make it look like atheists have a weak case. I'm certainly not saying that there's 100%, you know, certainty that there is no God. That would be an absolutely ridiculous claim. All I'm ever saying is that, you know, when religious people say God exists, my response is to say that I'm unconvinced because you haven't provided compelling evidence. And I don't know of very many atheists. I don't know of any atheist who would disagree with that statement that I just made. What are you referring to, Shadetree Surgeon? Who are these atheists who are declaring things with certainty? I mean, again, guys, this entire video is just one assertion after another and one straw man after another. How many more times are you going to misrepresent atheism and atheists? I don't know, I'm losing count here. If you took a shot every time he misrepresented the atheist community or erected a straw man, you'd be pissed by this point in the video. But look, let's continue.
Who the fuck am I to profess such a deep understanding of all the mysteries our universe has to offer? I mean, what a monstrous vanity it is to think that I could volunteer anything more substantial than merely a personal opinion on the existence of anything beyond these mortal breaths. I mean, I'm just some dude. Nothing more than a glorified caveman who doesn't do much else besides eat, drink, fight, and ride motorcycles.
Make assertions, misrepresent people, engage in fallacious reasoning, make assertions, etc., etc., etc. There's a hell of a lot more that you do, dear sir, than what you just listed, and it's all to see in this video of yours. And please notice the other thing, dear listener, the most ironic thing in the entire video, where he implies that atheists are arrogant, where he implies that atheists are the ones who are suggesting that they know more than what it is acceptable to claim that one knows.
Who the fuck am I to profess such a deep understanding of all the mysteries our universe has to offer?
All atheists are saying is that they're unconvinced in the claims that religious folk make. Religious folk are the ones who are suggesting, depending on which one you ask, of course, but many religious people believe that they know the creator of the universe and that they can pray to the creator of the universe, that they have a personal relationship with the creator of the universe, and that they know that the universe was created by him, and that they know that life was created by him. A lot of religious people, Christians and Muslims and so forth, have certitude in relation to a whole host of topics that scientists, atheists, and skeptic types are willing to admit that they don't know the answers for. I mean, scientists don't know how life emerged. We have no idea. We know how life proliferated and changed over time, a la the theory of evolution, but we don't know about where life came from. We don't know how life started. Scientists will hold up their hands and say, we just don't know. And I don't know of an atheist who would claim to know anything about how life began. I mean, we just have to hold up our hands and say, I don't know how that happened. Religious people don't do that. They say God did it. Who's the arrogant one here? The theists who are claiming to know the origin of life? The theists who are claiming to have a personal relationship with the creator of the universe? The theists who claim to be able to pray to an all-knowing, all-loving God? The theists who claim certainty on a whole host of hitherto unanswered questions in the scientific domain? They're claiming to know the answers to all of these things. Or at least they're claiming to have strong evidence in favour of knowing the answers to all of these things. Atheists are simply the people in the room who say, well, you know what, I'm not convinced about that because you haven't given me enough evidence, right? And you want to suggest that atheists are the arrogant ones who are proposing a false certitude? Who are, you know, erecting their belief as fact? Are you kidding me? All atheists are guilty of is being unconvinced of these outlandish claims that theists make. That's all they're guilty of. And that, in my view, is humility. To admit that one doesn't know or that they're unconvinced, that's not false certitude. That's just the honest acknowledgement of the limits of our epistemology. It's religious people who are arrogantly declaring things. So, look, I don't know, guys. This is just unbelievable. And this guy is a self-described atheist. It turns out that this Most Annoying Non-Religious People series is going to be pretty damn important, because if atheists on my side of the camp are making arguments this bad, then this series is necessary, I think. But let's move on.
I don't know jack shit. And in the same breath, I'll say, who the fuck am I to judge anybody else's opinion or belief on religion as any more or less valid than my own?
This is a really silly point. Of course we can judge the validity and the soundness of other people's beliefs. We do that with reference to evidence. He's proposing this really amorphous, nebulous framework of beliefs where everybody just gets to believe whatever they want and nobody's opinion or nobody's position is any more valid or sound than anybody else's.
Who the fuck am I to judge anybody else's opinion or belief on religion as any more or less valid than my own?
That is hogwash. That is a complete joke. I mean, let me explain with reference to an analogy. Let's use medicine. If you're sick, Shadetree Surgeon, is everybody's proposed solution to your sickness equally valid to everybody else's? Or are you going to go to a medical doctor? Would you rather go to the homeopathy practitioner and have them give you a solution of water? Or would you rather go to a medical doctor who's going to give you an antibiotic which has been tested and verified to be effective? Or are both of those things just equally valid in your kind of amorphous, nebulous framework of everybody's opinion is as valid and sound as everybody else's? What a crock of shit. And the same is true on every conceivable or possible claim. If theists are going to claim that there is a God and they don't have any evidence for it, then that claim is nowhere near as valid. Their position is nowhere near as valid and sound as the position of people who remain unconvinced by that, given the absence of evidence. Those 2 points of view are not on equal footing, my friend. Right? The burden of proof is on he who makes the claim. Theists are claiming that there is a God. Atheists aren't necessarily claiming that there isn't one, albeit that's a subset of atheism. But if I merely remain unconvinced of the theistic claim that God exists because they haven't provided evidence, our points of view aren't on equal footing. The truth is that the default position is to reject that theistic claim until such time that they provide evidence for it. And you pretending anything other than that just makes your epistemology look like nonsense. This is really, really silly. This is basic epistemology. No, not all claims are on equal footing. Not every opinion is equally valid and sound. There are differences, and evidence matters. And if you're going to suggest otherwise, then you and I are just living on different planets.
And frankly, it's rather unsurprising that these misanthropic personality traits crop up with such frequency, because atheism can only exist as an antithesis to a faith in God.
What he's just said here comes down to the definition of atheism, and it's a real problem. This is something that Sam Harris raised before. He thinks that we shouldn't even have a word for atheism. Harris's point is that, we don't have a word for non-astrologer, for people who don't believe in astrology, right? We don't have a word for people who don't collect stamps. I'm a non-stamp collector, right? We just have a word for stamp collectors and then nothing. There's no other word. The fact that we have a word for atheism is what's led Shadetree Surgeon to make this point, that atheism can only exist as a response or as the antithesis of theism.
Atheism can only exist as an antithesis to a faith in God.
But that's not exactly true, depending on your definition. That's like saying non-stamp collector can only exist as a label, as an antithesis to stamp collector. But the truth is, people just walk around and they're not stamp collectors. We don't have a word for it. We don't have a label for it, right? We don't think of ourselves as being the opposite to stamp collectors. And if somebody said, oh, well, the only reason you can call yourself a non-stamp collector is because stamp collectors exist, that would be a strange statement to make. The truth is, guys, when we're born, we don't believe in God, right? I mean, when we're born, we don't have a belief in God. We're non-religious at birth. And the only reason we become religious is if we're raised in a faith. We don't have any concept of God when we're born. And some children never have a concept of God because they're raised in secular societies. Scandinavia, for example. Most people there are atheists or agnostic or non-religious or some description like that. And so the idea that atheism only exists as an antithesis to theism doesn't really make sense to me. Imagine the hypothetical where a belief in God never emerged, where religions don't exist, a completely secular society where nobody believes in a god or gods and religion doesn't exist. In my opinion, the people of that society, or the people in that hypothetical, are atheists. They're people who do not have an active belief in a god. They don't even have knowledge of a god. Now, some people might not be prepared to call those people atheists, which is why I'm saying this might very well come down to definitions. All I mean by atheist is that those people do not have an active belief in a god. That's all I mean. Now, some people try to trivialize this argument and you say, oh, well, doesn't that make rocks atheists? Because rocks don't have an active belief in God. And I would say, no, that's hogwash. That's very silly. Clearly, the definition of atheist that I'm erecting is people who do not have an active belief in God. I can give you a parody argument for those who might erect the rock analogy and say that, if I define vegetarianism as people who do not eat meat, right? You might then respond and say, oh, but doesn't that mean rocks are vegetarians because they don't eat meat? And I would say, no, that would be silly. Because again, listen to the definition. Vegetarians are people who don't eat meat. And so no, rocks wouldn't be vegetarians because they're not people. Even though rocks don't eat meat, that's true, because rocks don't eat anything, they're still not vegetarians because they're not people. And part of the definition of vegetarian is a person who does not eat meat. Similarly, with atheism, I define atheists as people who do not have an active belief in God. And so no, I don't believe that atheism requires theism in order to exist. I would say that a completely secular society that had no concept of God would be an atheistic society. These would be people who do not have an active belief in God, a God, gods, or the divine more generally. And so perhaps we're just disagreeing here on our definitions, Shadetree Surgeon. But no, I'm not convinced that atheism can only exist as an antithesis to theism. But with that acknowledged, let's move on.
So it becomes easy for weak minds to, rather than treat the adoption of atheism as just a personal philosophy, to treat it more like joining forces in a righteous war waged on religion.
He's attempting to trivialize atheists here, the ones who view atheism as a social movement, as an activist movement, but by trivializing it, he shows his own ignorance, because the truth is atheists do have some metaphorical battles to fight and still some battles to win. I mean, just look at the world, right? Look at the religious hegemony. Look at the fact that, children are still indoctrinated in schools into religious faith systems where teachers preach rather than teach. Look at the parts of the world where homosexuals and women are immiserated under the rubric of religion, right? I mean, what are you talking about here? Look at Africa, the continent of Africa, where the Catholic Church is out on force, encouraging the people of Africa not to use contraceptives, even though there are parts of Africa that are ravaged by HIV/AIDS and high birth rates. Obviously, in a continent ravaged by poverty and HIV in certain parts, those parts would flourish, or they would function more optimally if contraception were permitted, because it would reduce birth rates and prevent the spread or the further spread of HIV/AIDS. But no, the Catholic Church insists in its conservative values that that contraceptives, even in this context where they would be a net good, they insist on not using them, right? So to pretend like atheists don't have some battles to win or don't have some battles to fight, metaphorically speaking, just makes you ignorant. To try and trivialize the atheist movement and those who might view it as an activist movement or a social rights movement even, because atheists don't have equal rights in every part of the world and so on. This is an important social movement. It is an important, force for change and progress. But he trivializes it here, and in so doing, he reveals his ignorance of the actual issues. Well, I'm sorry, Shadetree Surgeon, that you're ignorant, but while you remain ignorant and just allege that atheists are assholes, us, atheists who care will continue to fight for change and progress in the world, while you just sit there and bat your chest and pretend like you're superior to the rest of us.
I was inspired to make this video by a fellow YouTuber on here by the name of Darth V Twin, who recently made a vlog about his own struggles to balance his belief while also continuing to respect his father's faith. And it really resonated with me because it's a struggle I've been through and sometimes still go through myself. But Darth V Twin has the right of it. Respect is the name of the game. To respect a belief, only hinging on the fact that you also share that belief, is to live your life with blinders on. I have many friends, both in real life and here on YouTube, for whom religion plays a large part in their lives. Their faith is an integral part of their personality and who they are, so why would I ever try to disparage that or try to convince them to leave it behind?
Because it's not true. That's why. If you care about the truth, that's why you might try to convince somebody that they're mistaken. But also, all of those examples of negative utility. Maybe by convincing the person that their faith is untrue, you might liberate them, Shadetree Surgeon. Maybe religion doesn't merely confer comfort upon them. Maybe they're the kind of theist who goes to bed every night suffering from existential anxiety about whether or not they're going to go to hell. Maybe they're the kind of theist who goes to bed every night feeling, sexual guilt because they looked at another woman with lust in their heart. And as the Bible says, to merely look at a woman in that way is to commit adultery. In other words, the Bible convicts you of thought crime. These are impossible standards, and they can create sexual repression, guilt, and existential anxiety, all surrounding the question of judgment and whether or not you're going to be welcomed through the pearly gates or whether or not you go to hell and burn forever. Pretending like religion is just this private belief that confers upon individuals a sense of comfort is a gross generalization. Speaking of generalizations, there are millions of people who suffer at the hands of their faith. Look at the Middle East. Look at many Muslim-majority countries where the hands are removed from thieves according to religious prescriptions, where a woman's word is worth half of a man's, right? These are religious prescriptions. Are you telling me that these people wouldn't feel a sense of liberation, that those women wouldn't feel a sense of liberation were they convinced that their faith is hogwash? I mean, maybe they would or maybe they wouldn't. I'm just pointing out that there's a fertile conversation to be had there. Suffice to say, we can't just assume that stripping people of their faith is a net negative. Every now and then, if not in millions of cases, stripping a person of their faith is to strip them of their fear and their anxiety and their PTSD. Have you heard of fear of hell syndrome? This is a recognized condition, right? People wake up screaming every night because of nightmares of their skin burning off, regrowing and burning off again. We cannot just sit here and pretend that faith merely confers comfort upon individuals. It immiserates people. It convicts them of thought crime. Now, am I saying it only does that? No, I'm not saying that it's all negative and all it does is cause misery. There's clearly positive utility as well. I'm just saying that it comes down to the individual. So when Shadetree Surgeon suggests here that it would be improper or inappropriate to strip somebody of their faith,
why would I ever try to disparage that or try to convince them them to leave it behind.
He's just grossly generalizing, and he's ignoring all of the cases that conflict with his worldview, all of the people who suffer at the hands of their religion, the LGBTQ plus community who live in constant guilt and sexual repression. We love the sinner, but we hate the sin. How despicable a mantra is that? If you're gay, you should be able to express your nature. So long as that expression is consensual and you're at the age of consent and so forth, have at it. Make love, be happy. As Christopher Hitchens once put it, homosexuality is not just a sexuality, it's a form of love. It is a form of love. Unfortunately, there are many theists, Muslims, Christians, and Jews and so forth, who beg to differ on that front because their ancient holy book suggests otherwise. I'm suggesting that ridding someone of their religion could, depending on the individual, be a liberation. And the fact that Shadetree Surgeon doesn't acknowledge that those cases exist shows his ignorance on this subject.
It boils down to this. I do think it's really healthy for people to every so often take a step back and really examine their own mortality and how it relates to their own beliefs. It's a different journey for everyone, and we all end up in wildly different places after taking it. And if the destination that journey brings you to is a better place not only for yourself, your friends, and the world around you, then that's something to be respected. All right, guys, that's it for this week.
And there you hear the assumption again, that religion will bring us to a positive destination as opposed to a negative destination, and that as a consequence of that, we should respect it.
And if the destination that journey brings you to is a better place not only for yourself, your friends, and the world around you, then that's something to be respected.
Well, Shadetree Surgeon, as I've already pointed out, by saying that you reveal your ignorance about all of the negative destinations that faith can bring us to. I won't recapitulate those now because I'd only be repeating myself. But suffice to say, I don't agree with you that all beliefs are deserving of respect. I just don't agree with you. Ridiculous ideas deserve ridicule. Evidentially bankrupt ideas deserve critique. And dangerous ideas deserve examination and exposure. And religion engages in a plethora of all of those categories of thought and claims. Religion has its fair share of ridiculous ideas, evidentially bankrupt ideas, and dangerous ideas. And so no, I don't think that those ideas deserve respect. There are some religious beliefs that I respect, but there are others I do not. And I think that we should challenge, critique, and expose the ideas that don't meet those standards. Dangerous ideas, evidentially bankrupt ideas, and so forth deserve to be challenged. They don't deserve respect. This idea that beliefs deserve respect is fridge magnet wisdom. And I'm sorry, but on my channel, we delve a little bit deeper than fridge magnet wisdom. I'm not going to respect the indefensible, evil, despicable beliefs that come out of Deuteronomy. I'm not going to respect or take seriously or just let alone the despicable beliefs of the removal of the hands of thieves and archaic medieval punishments that come out of Sharia, for example. These things deserve our critique, and I think the world is a better place when those things are critiqued and when we reflect on them and when we encourage people to lose those beliefs. The idea that these beliefs deserve respect and that we should just leave them alone is arguably itself a dangerous belief, Shadetree Surgeon, because by failing to challenge these dangerous and evidentially bankrupt ideas, we risk having our own rights and our own well-being taken away. What am I talking about? Well, guys, beliefs don't exist in a vacuum. The fact that people have private beliefs is fine. The fact that they comfort you is fine. But the fact that you can vote means that your beliefs can have an influence on my life and the lives of my loved ones. This is why we can't just accept this fridge magnet wisdom that everybody gets to have their own private belief and we should just respect what everybody thinks and every belief is equally valid and equally sound and why can't we just all get along? Kumbaya, my lord. Bullshit. Absolute hogwash. That is how we get to the reversal of Roe v. Wade. That's how we get there, folks. We get there by ignoring people's beliefs and pretending that every belief deserves to be respected. Are you telling me that if a Christian points out that they think homosexuality is evil and wrong, that I should respect that belief? Isn't it possible that that belief could lead to anti-homosexual legislation in the future should there be a vote on, say, for example, gay marriage? Aren't all of those private beliefs that you want me to respect going to come out on force and cast a private ballot in that referendum should it occur? This is precisely why we can't just let things be. This is precisely why we can't just let people have their private beliefs and have a c'est la vie attitude. That is fridge magnet wisdom, and that belief itself is dangerous. Dangerous ideas need to be challenged, and that's precisely why I made this video. And with that said, folks, we have reached the end. I hope you appreciated the second episode of the most annoying, or in this case, probably the most dangerous non-religious people. If you are enjoying this series, jump into the comments below and let me know why. I would love some suggestions, by the way. If you have an atheist or an agnostic or a skeptic who's made a claim that you find objectionable that you'd like me to respond to, please make me aware of that video in the comment section below, because I'm aggressively searching for videos for this series, because I want to develop this series just like I developed my other series about the most annoying religious people. Other than that, guys, if you disagreed with any of my criticisms, jump into the comments below and let me know why. Constructive criticism is always welcome, and I always prioritize the comments that disagree with me, because I want to know where I'm mistaken, if I am mistaken, and if you can enlighten me, I'd love to hear it. I just want to extend an extra special thank you to my patrons. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for your generous and continued support. If you want to become a patron like those I've just mentioned, you can jump into the description box below and click the link to my Patreon page. Go to that page and you can sign up for as little as £3 per month, and for that you can gain access to a plethora of perks, bonuses and extras. Thank you very much for watching this video, folks, and I hope to see you in the next one. All the best. Bye bye.